Have you ever felt like you are being attacked the hardest right when you are at your absolute weakest, when the sun goes down? The house gets completely quiet, and you are lying there, your body aching from the undeniable toll of getting older. Your mind is heavy with worries about your children, about your finances, or the silent, suffocating emptiness of missing loved ones who are no longer sitting across the room. Right in that moment of extreme exhaustion and isolation, a dark storm of negative thoughts, fear, doubt, and a feeling of being completely abandoned crashes over you. You ask yourself, why now? Why? When I am already so weak and have no fight left in me? Won't these trials, temptations, and heavy burdens just leave me alone? If you are experiencing this suffocating and helpless feeling right now, I need you to stop everything and listen to me very carefully. You are not alone. And more importantly, this is not a coincidence. This is not happening because you are inadequate. And it is certainly not because God has forgotten you. This attack is a calculated, intentional strategy by the enemy. Today, we are going to uncover the 10 profound reasons why the spiritual enemy almost always chooses to attack you right when you are most vulnerable and fragile. Reason number 1. The enemy attacks your vulnerability because he is terrified of the supernatural strength God is about to release in that exact moment. Think about this for a moment. In the natural world, the most cunning predators never attack prey that is strong and alert. They wait, they stalk, and they target the ones who are wounded, tired, or isolated. Our spiritual enemy operates on a similar principle, but it is driven by a much deeper fear. He doesn't attack you when you are weak just because you are an easy target. He attacks you because he knows a profound spiritual truth. God's power is made perfect in our weakness. When you were younger and healthier, when doors were opening and you had all your physical strength, you probably relied a lot on yourself. But when you are pushed to the absolute edge of your limits, when you look in the mirror and see the lines of aging growing deeper, when your body doesn't listen to you anymore and you have nothing left to lean on, that prideful self-reliance completely crumbles. You are forced to let go and fully depend on the Almighty. The enemy knows very well that the second you cry out from the bottom of your desperation, an invincible divine strength is activated. He hits you with everything he has in the middle of the night, right when you are sick or lonely, to plant a toxic lie in your mind. God has abandoned you. He wants you to collapse right at the threshold of your spiritual breakthrough. He wants to use the physical signs of your aging as leverage to destroy your faith. But remember this, your weakness is not the end of your story. It is the sacred ground, the perfect empty space for God's power to fill. The enemy is attacking you at your most fragile because he is desperate. He is terrified that you will realize the truth even when your own legs can no longer hold you up. The everlasting arms of God are already carrying you. Reason number 2. The enemy attacks you in your vulnerability because physical isolation is his favorite breeding ground for spiritual deception. Let us talk about the silence for a moment. As the years go by, your world inevitably changes. The house that used to be filled with the chaotic, beautiful noise of children running down the hallway is now quiet. The phone does not ring as often as it used to. Friends you have known for decades might have moved away, or perhaps they have already gone home to be with the Lord. You find yourself spending much more time alone. And while you might put on a brave, smiling face for the few people you do see at the grocery store or at church, the truth is, the isolation sometimes feels like a heavy physical blanket pressing down on your chest. The spiritual enemy watches this transition carefully. He waits for the silence to settle in. Why? Because when you are physically isolated, it is infinitely easier for him to distort your spiritual reality. In the wild, a predator will always try to separate a single sheep from the safety of the flock before it strikes. When you are surrounded by a vibrant community of believers, a lie from the enemy is quickly exposed by the truth of a friend. But when you are alone, sitting in your living room late at night, watching the shadows dance on the wall, a whisper of doubt can echo so loudly that it starts to sound like the absolute truth. He will whisper lies perfectly tailored to your specific age and stage of life. He will tell you that your best days are completely behind you. He will try to convince you that your prayers no longer matter, that you are simply taking up space, and that your life has lost its purpose now that you are not as active as you once were. When your body is tired and your heart is hurting, these lies do not just attack your mind, they sink deep into your bones. You start to believe that this lonely path is a sign of God's rejection rather than a season of His protection. But here is the secret the enemy desperately hopes you never figure out. God often allows this physical isolation to strip away the competing voices of the world so you can finally learn to recognize His voice with absolute, unmistakable clarity. Think about the prophet Elijah. After a massive spiritual victory, he ran into the wilderness, exhausted, depressed, and believing he was completely alone. He sat under a tree and actually asked God to take his life. But God did not shout at him from a crowd. God came to him in a still, small voice, right there in his deep isolation. Your lonely room is not a forgotten corner of the world. It is a private sanctuary. The enemy attacks you there because he wants to fill the silence with his toxic lies before God fills it with his healing truth. Do not let him win this battle. The next time the house feels too quiet and the loneliness starts to physically ache, recognize it for what it really is, a divine invitation to speak to the Creator of the universe without any interruptions. Reason number 3, the enemy attacks you at your weakest because he wants to destroy your spiritual legacy and convince you that your entire life has been meaningless. Take a moment and look back at the long road you have traveled for decades. You worked yourself to the bone. You sacrificed your sleep, poured out your sweat and tears to raise your children, build your family, and serve your community. You used to be the one everyone came to for help. You were the unshakable pillar for the people around you. But now, as time has left its undeniable marks on your body, as your steps are not as quick as they used to be, you have been forced to step back and let the younger generation take the stage. And in that transition, an invisible, quiet void begins to form. It is exactly inside this quiet, unstable void that the spiritual enemy makes his move. He does not show up as a terrifying monster. He comes as a toxic whisper right in your ear while you are sitting alone in your quiet house. He taunts you, look around. Nobody really needs you anymore. Your children are grown and too busy for you. Your prayers do not seem to be changing anything. Your life is just quietly fading into oblivion. When your joints are aching and your mind is exhausted, this lie has a devastating, destructive power. It strikes directly at the greatest fear of growing older, the fear of becoming obsolete, useless, and a burden to the ones you love. He wants to break you right now because he knows a truth that you might have temporarily forgotten. Your greatest legacy has absolutely nothing to do with the physical strength of your youth. Your true legacy is the spiritual power you hold in your hands right at this very second. The enemy is absolutely terrified of your tears and your silent prayers in the middle of the night. He knows that an older believer, down on their knees interceding for the next generation, has the power to tear down spiritual strongholds much faster than any young, energetic warrior ever could. Do you remember Anna in the Bible? She was an 84-year-old widow. By the standards of her society, she was past her prime, unable to contribute physical labor and easily overlooked. But she never left the temple. She stayed there, fasting and praying day and night. And because of that hidden, solitary devotion, she was granted the ultimate honor of being one of the very first people to witness and announce the Savior of the world. The enemy attacks your feelings of uselessness because he is terrified of the Anna rising up inside of you. He is afraid you will realize that standing in the gap for your children and grandchildren in this quiet season is the greatest weapon you have ever wielded. Do not let his cruel lies steal your crown. The silence and the physical limitations you are facing right now are not signs of the end. They are a spiritual promotion. God is bringing you into the highest level of spiritual warfare, where you no longer fight with physical energy, but with deep faith and total surrender to Him. Reason number 4. The enemy attacks you in your most vulnerable moments to weaponize your past regrets and drown out your present peace. When you are young, you run so fast that you rarely have time to look over your shoulder. You are constantly moving, building, and fixing. But as the years go by and the pace of life naturally slows down, you find yourself with something you never had enough of before time to think. You sit in your favorite chair. The house is perfectly still. And suddenly, your mind becomes a movie screen replaying your greatest mistakes. You think about the times you feel you failed as a parent, the harsh words you said that you can never take back, the financial missteps, or the relationships that slowly fractured over the years. In these quiet, physically exhausting hours, when you are emotionally unguarded, the spiritual enemy does not just casually remind you of your past. He amplifies it. He turns your natural human reflection into supernatural condemnation. Why does he choose to strike you with this when you are already feeling weak and fragile? Because he knows that an older believer wrapped in the heavy, suffocating chains of shame cannot lift their hands in worship or boldly pray for their family. He wants to completely paralyze you. He whispers into the silence that the grace of God has an expiration date, and that you have somehow crossed it. He will even try to convince you that your current physical ailments, your aches and pains, or your lonely circumstances are the direct punishment for those past sins. He uses the undeniable frailty of your aging body to convince you that your spirit is just as broken, defective, and beyond repair. But I need you to hear the absolute truth right now. The enemy only brings up your past because he is absolutely terrified of your present spiritual authority. The Apostle Paul had a past filled with violence and deep regret, yet he wrote about forgetting what is behind and straining toward what is ahead. You might look at your life and think, what is ahead of me at this age? The answer is profound, unshakable wisdom. God has carried you through those past mistakes not to condemn you in your old age, but to produce a deep, authentic mercy within you. You are uniquely equipped to counsel, to pray for, and to guide the younger generation precisely because you have survived those failures and experienced God's redeeming grace firsthand. Do not let the enemy turn your quiet moments into a courtroom where he gets to play the prosecutor. The next time those dark memories flood your mind when you are feeling tired and alone, recognize the strategy. Speak out loud that your debts are paid. Your current vulnerability is not an open door for the enemy's shame. It is the perfect, quiet canvas for God's overwhelming mercy. Reason number 5. The enemy uses your physical exhaustion to plant seeds of deep bitterness and make you doubt the absolute goodness of God. Let us be completely honest about the physical reality of growing older. There are days when simply getting out of bed feels like a monumental task. You might find yourself sitting in a doctor's office, listening to yet another diagnosis, or looking at a list of medications that seems to grow longer every single year. The activities you used to do effortlessly, like playing with your grandchildren, tending to your garden, or simply taking a long walk, now require days of recovery, chronic pain, sleepless nights, and the frustrating reality of a body that no longer responds the way it used to can drain every ounce of your emotional energy. The spiritual enemy watches this physical decline very closely. He waits for the exact moment when you are rubbing your aching joints or lying awake at 3 in the morning, unable to sleep from the discomfort. That is when he drops his most venomous lie right into your mind. He whispers, "If God truly loved you, why would he let you suffer like this? You have served him your whole life, and this is how he repays you with pain, with sickness." He does not just want you to feel physical pain. He wants to weaponize that pain to breed a deep, toxic bitterness in your soul. He wants you to look at your aging body and conclude that God has turned his back on you. But you must recognize this deception for what it really is. The enemy is trying to tie your spiritual worth to your physical vitality, which is a complete lie. The Apostle Paul understood this battle intimately. He suffered from severe physical ailments, a thorn in the flesh that he begged God to remove. Yet, Paul reached a profound revelation that the enemy is terrified you will discover. Even though our outer self is wasting away, our inner self is being renewed day by day. The enemy attacks your physical vulnerability because he is absolutely terrified of your spiritual resilience. He knows that a believer who can look at a declining health report, endure physical discomfort, and still softly declare that God is good is the ultimate threat to the kingdom of darkness. Your physical frailty is not a sign of God's absence. It is the very canvas where his sustaining grace is displayed most vividly. As your physical eyes may grow dim, your spiritual sight is becoming sharper and more focused than ever before. Do not let the enemy turn your physical exhaustion into spiritual bitterness. Your body may be tired, but your spirit is being anchored in a truth that cannot be shaken. Reason number 6. The enemy attacks your sense of independence to convince you that you are a burden, tricking you into silencing your own voice when the world needs it most. One of the hardest transitions in life is moving from being the ultimate provider to realizing you might need a little help yourself. For decades, you were the strong one. You were the one who fixed the broken things, wiped the tears, and carried the heavy loads for everyone else. But as the years advance, your physical strength naturally shifts. Maybe you cannot drive at night anymore. Maybe you need help reaching something on a high shelf. Or perhaps you just need someone to sit with you because the quiet house is becoming too much to bear. But instead of reaching out, a terrible, suffocating fear takes over, the fear of becoming a burden to your children and the people you love. You see them rushing around, managing their own stressful careers and raising their kids, and you quietly decide to step back. You hide your physical pain. You do not mention your loneliness. You suffer in complete silence just to make their lives a little bit easier. The spiritual enemy watches this perfectly normal, loving instinct to protect your family, and he cruelly weaponizes it against you. Right when your heart is aching for connection, he strikes. He whispers into your ear, "They are too busy for you. You are just slowing them down. You have nothing left to offer them. It is better if you just stay out of the way." He attacks you with this specific lie when you are physically and emotionally fragile because he knows exactly how to manipulate your independent spirit. But you must understand his real motive. He does not just want to make you feel lonely. He wants to completely silence your spiritual voice. The enemy is absolutely terrified of the generational wisdom, the seasoned faith, and the powerful testimonies you hold inside of you. He knows that if he can convince you to hide in the shadows because you feel like a nuisance, the younger generation will be entirely robbed of the spiritual guidance they desperately need to survive their own storms. Your physical limitations are not a signal to step down from your spiritual position. Your family might be incredibly busy, but your presence is not a burden. It is an irreplaceable spiritual anchor. God specifically designed the family and the church to rely on the seasoned wisdom of the elders. Your stories of how God brought you through impossible hardships are the exact survival guide the next generation needs. Do not let the enemy trick you into voluntary isolation. Your vulnerability is not a weakness. It is a profound, beautiful opportunity for your family to learn compassion and for you to pass down a legacy of faith that will outlive you. Reason number 7. The enemy attacks your mind with overwhelming anxiety during your quietest hours to drown out the direct voice of God. As you get older, the nature of your worries begins to change. You are no longer stressing about climbing the corporate ladder or building a resume. Instead, your late-night thoughts are consumed by very real, heavy burdens. You lie awake waiting for the results of a medical test. You worry endlessly about the chaotic world your grandchildren are growing up in. You silently calculate your retirement savings, wondering if it will truly be enough to last the rest of your life. In the stillness of the night, when the house is completely dark and the world outside has stopped, these anxieties do not just whisper, they scream. The spiritual enemy does not create the quiet, but he absolutely exploits it. He waits for you to be alone with your thoughts, and then he floods your mind with a tidal wave of panic, worst-case scenarios, and paralyzing what-ifs. Why does he launch this severe mental attack when you are already physically tired and emotionally drained? Because he knows a profound secret about the season of life you are in right now. In your younger, busier years, you probably heard God through sermons, through the advice of mentors, or amidst the bustling fellowship of a vibrant church community. But in this seasoned chapter of your life, God wants to speak to you directly. He wants to give you specific divine instructions, profound comfort, and deep revelations that do not require a middleman. The enemy is absolutely terrified of a mature believer who knows exactly how to hear the voice of the Good Shepherd. So the enemy creates a massive storm of mental noise. He attacks your vulnerable moments with anxiety, because he knows that overwhelming fear and quiet faith cannot occupy the same space. He wants you to be so consumed by the fear of tomorrow that you cannot hear the gentle, guiding whisper of God today. He wants you frantically searching for answers on the evening news, in medical articles, or in the frantic advice of the world rather than sitting in the stillness and simply listening to your Creator. But you have a lifetime of evidence that God is faithful. You have survived every single worst-case scenario the enemy ever threatened you with in the past. The next time the panic sets in during those lonely midnight hours, recognize the attack for what it really is. It is just noise. The enemy is making a loud racket because he is desperate to distract you from the profound, life-changing word God is about to speak into your spirit. Take a deep breath. Command the anxiety to leave and embrace the quiet. Your shepherd is speaking, and your seasoned ears are finally ready to hear him. Reason number 8. The enemy attacks you during your most fragile moments to break your spiritual resilience before it can fully mature into unbreakable authority. Think about how predictable and comfortable your life might have been just a decade or two ago. You had a solid routine, a reliable schedule, and the physical stamina to simply handle whatever life threw at you. But as the aging process takes hold, Many of those everyday comforts and certainties are slowly, inevitably stripped away. You might face new dietary restrictions, frustrating mobility issues, or the deeply humbling reality that you can no longer just jump up and fix things around the house. You are slowly being forced into a state of physical dependence, having to rely on others for things you used to do with your eyes closed. The spiritual enemy watches this deeply uncomfortable transition like a hawk. He waits for the exact moment when you are feeling the most stripped of your dignity and independence. Perhaps it happens when you have to ask a younger family member for help with a basic daily task, or when you are confined to a chair, quietly watching others do the heavy lifting you used to do. That is the exact second the enemy strikes. He whispers a cruel lie into your spirit, telling you that this physical decline is actually humiliation. He wants you to focus so heavily on the loss of your physical strength that you completely miss the massive spiritual endurance being forged inside of you. He attacks your fragile, dependent state because he wants you to complain, to grow irritable, and to bitterly resent the very process God is actively using to refine your soul. But here is the profound truth that makes the enemy tremble supernatural. Unshakable resilience is never ever built in a state of comfort. It is only forged in the intense fire of affliction and physical limitation. When your body is weak, when you are in physical pain, and when you still choose to close your eyes and whisper, "Lord, I trust you anyway," you are building a level of spiritual authority that simply cannot be learned from reading a book or sitting in a comfortable church pew. You are earning the rare, battle-tested faith that actually moves mountains. The enemy attacks your physical discomfort and vulnerability because he knows that if you endure this frustrating season with a trusting heart, you will become a lethal weapon against his kingdom. Your enduring quiet faith becomes a living, breathing testimony to your children and grandchildren that God is completely faithful, even when the human body begins to fail. Do not let the enemy trick you into turning your physical trials into spiritual defeat. Your current struggle is not a humiliating end. It is the heavy, beautiful weight of eternal glory being prepared exclusively for you. Reason number 9. The enemy attacks your vulnerability because he desperately wants to rob your final chapters of joy and make you terrified of the road ahead. There is a very sobering realization that comes when you reach a certain age. You look at the calendar. You look back at the decades that have flown by like a passing shadow, and you realize that there are likely fewer days ahead of you than there are behind you. This is not a morbid thought. It is simply the natural, quiet reality of the human experience. But when you are sitting alone, perhaps dealing with a new, frightening diagnosis or watching your physical world slowly shrink, this realization can leave you feeling incredibly exposed and incredibly fragile. The spiritual enemy loves to hover over this exact vulnerability. He waits until you are staring into the unknown future, and then he projects a terrifying, dark narrative into your mind. He whispers terrifying scenarios about losing your memory, losing your home, or losing your basic dignity. He wants you to be so consumed by the sheer terror of how your earthly story might end that you completely forget who is actually holding the pen. He attacks you at this seasoned stage because he wants your final chapters to be written in anxiety, bitterness, and dread. He wants you to cross the finish line limping in defeat rather than walking in absolute, unshakable victory. But you need to understand why he is fighting so fiercely to steal your peace right now. The enemy is absolutely terrified of a believer who looks at the setting sun of their life and smiles. He is completely paralyzed by an older saint who faces the natural decline of their physical body with a radiant, profound anticipation for eternity. When you refuse to let fear dictate your final chapters, your life becomes the ultimate defeat to the kingdom of darkness. God has not brought you this incredibly far to abandon you in the final stretch. The Lord has promised in His word to carry you even to your gray hairs. The enemy attacks your peace because he knows that if you embrace the road ahead with joy and absolute trust, your life will become a massive, glowing beacon of hope for your children and grandchildren. Do not let the thief steal the crowning glory of your faith. Your future, no matter how physically uncertain it may seem in this earthly realm, is secured by hands that have never once dropped you. You are not walking toward the end of your story. You are simply walking toward the beautiful, breathtaking beginning. Reason number 10. The enemy attacks your vulnerability right now because he is completely terrified that you will discover this solitary season is actually the highest, sacred trust God has ever given you. Let us take a deep breath and look at the absolute reality of the journey you are on. When you reach this seasoned chapter of life, there is an undeniable stripping away of the things that used to define you. The bustling career, the noisy household, the endless physical stamina, and the constant need to prove yourself to the world. They all slowly fade into the background. In their place is a profound stillness, a physical vulnerability, and a quietness that the world often cruelly mislabels as abandonment. The spiritual enemy will do absolutely everything in his power to convince you that this physical isolation means you are forgotten. He wants you to look at your empty living room and your aging hands, and believe that God has simply placed you on a shelf to collect dust until the end. He launches his most vicious, relentless attacks during your moments of physical frailty because he is desperate to hide a glorious, breathtaking truth from you. Not everyone is trusted with a solitary path. This quiet season is not a punishment for your past, nor is it a sign of your uselessness. It is the exact opposite. It is an exclusive, sacred invitation. God is deliberately removing the noisy distractions of the world because he wants a private audience with you before you cross the finish line. Think about the greatest figures in the Bible. Moses went up the mountain alone to be with God. John the Apostle received the greatest revelation of his life while exiled and entirely alone on the island of Patmos. When you are physically vulnerable and the crowd has faded away, you are actually in the most elite spiritual company imaginable. The enemy is attacking your mind and body because he knows that in this quiet, solitary space, you are receiving divine peace and a spiritual authority that can only be granted to a faithful, lifelong servant. Your vulnerable season is not a waiting room for death. It is a sacred sanctuary, preparing you for the ultimate transition into eternal glory. God has looked at your lifetime of faithfulness and decided that you are strong enough, wise enough, and trusted enough to walk this profound, solitary path. Do not let the enemy's cheap, fearful lies diminish the breathtaking beauty of your current assignment. You are not fading away. You are being refined into pure gold. Your prayers right now, whispered in the quiet of your room, are shaking the very gates of heaven and covering your family in ways you will only understand in eternity. Embrace this sacred trust. Stand firm against the lies of the enemy. The quietness around you is not emptiness. It is the glorious, undeniable presence of the Almighty walking intimately with you, step by step, all the way home.